Metroid Prime 4 is the most conflicted I've been with a game for a long time. It's somehow amazingly atmospheric and fun at times, yet so frustratingly bad by the end I completely stopped playing out of pure apathy. I seriously think anyone who tells you there's nothing of value here is lying or hasn't actually played it. The opening sequence is pretty amazing. As much as the word epic may be out of style, I just can't think of a better way to describe the moody, intense atmosphere. It truly feels like a desperate battle is taking place, the sky filled with smoke, bullets, aircraft, and a giant hangar looming over the military base. Although despite how desperate the situation might look, the voice acting is so stilted here. Everyone seems either completely calm or straight up bored, and I think it's a strange blemish on an otherwise really solid introduction.
This is my first time in combat and I wasn't ready. I will be next time.
But then, a little later on in the game, there's this golden period, where the redundant radio calls and uninteresting backtracking through Soul Valley couldn't hold a candle to how much fun I was having. I loved Vault Forge, for example. It's so dark and atmospheric, so eerie yet beautiful. You work your way down past strange alien machinery, eventually starting up the generator, and all of a sudden it comes to life. The atmosphere completely shifts as you work your way back up, giving new, interesting, and honestly kind of funny context to the environment around you. We've seen the same traditional biomes in video games over and over again, and I was so excited to be exploring something as original as an alien motorbike factory. After plenty of teasing, you finally get to ride a motorbike of your own, eventually ending up in a test facility that promises your biking skills are going to be put to the test in some kind of amazing flashy sequence later on, and then that's never happened. This is a pretty long drawn out tutorial too, which does all of this basically just to communicate that you can boost and shoot. And this is where it all starts to fall apart, where the game feels so messy and unfinished, so perfect in one moment but so completely out of touch in the next. When we learned about Miles Mackenzie's annoying, Marvel-esque, quippy dialogue just before launch, a lot of people were reasonably concerned, but personally I actually wasn't too worried. I mean, I've played most of the Metroid games, at least a little bit, but I've never been as invested in being fully immersed as I know some of the more hardcore fans are. Plus, while I do like the series, not being a huge superfan means the stakes weren't as high for me. I haven't been waiting with bated breath for the new Metroid Prime game this whole time, and I was sure I could enjoy it even if it wasn't everything the Metroid community had been dreaming of. In fact, I have to be one of the only people in the world who enjoyed Metroid Other M. Obviously these days I can see it's a terrible characterization of Samus. Why is she so small? But at the time I was a child, to be fair. I thought the combat was really fun and I thought Samus was really hot. I won't lie, 11-year-old me was kind of in love with her after seeing this. So with that said, I'm familiar with the series, but I clearly don't have the most incredibly high expectations as long as I enjoy the gameplay and visuals. And yet, I don't think I like Metroid Prime 4. Possibly as a result of its excruciatingly long development time, it feels like something a skilled team carefully crafted, only for a clueless executive to walk in the room demanding they add a literal empty desert to pad the game length, and not so lovable side characters to tell you what you just saw. Thank you, Miles, I did notice that actually. The worst part about these characters is that they only serve to detract from the experience, adding absolutely nothing of value, and trust me, our friend Miles here is far from the worst. You know what, giving games a way to ask for advice if you're stuck is actually not a terrible idea in my opinion. Does it make progression less rewarding? Probably. But ultimately, if someone's stuck and they just want to move on, this makes the game far less frustrating. In my time with Metroid Prime 4 though, despite their constant nagging, I don't think they actually helped me a single time. Rather, it was like a group of babies would constantly follow me around and babble in my ear as I'd be forced to protect them and wait for them to stop f***ing around so I could move forward. Okay, Mackenzie, I have the chip that you just told me to bring here. Okay, something's... I see something's happening here. Is this funny?
Alright, how's that? Better?
Okay, that's pretty funny. Can we can I give you the chip and can I move forward with the game? I don't really care about this. I can't lie, I actually don't care about this at all, please. Okay, we're moving on. Okay. Miles, I have the chip that you wanted. Yes. Yes.
Let me see
okay.
I'd love to see the chip myself.
Okay.
Could you wait until we
Okay,
get to
go
the
over to the
holo
table. No rush. No rush. It's not like we're stuck on an alien planet. Okay, come on. Can we go to the table? How long is this gonna take? It took me 5 hours to get here to begin with. Okay, he's at the table. Okay. Okay, let's move forward. Okay, let me talk. Okay. And straight into another cutscene. Okay. No one looking at this scenery needs Miles Mackenzie to remind them there's a huge, impressive looking tree in the distance. And in fact, when I did stop for a moment to take it all in, he ran towards a pack of enemies and started dying, completely removing my ability to appreciate the very thing they used him to highlight. Solving puzzles to progress is a core element of Metroid, but on multiple occasions I approached something that looked new and interesting, only for the NPCs to immediately solve it for me in a desperate attempt to justify their existence. What about this is supposed to be fun? It's just a standard door with extra steps, and as the player, my engagement with those extra steps is that I get to wait for these guys to do something. The game has so little faith in the player's short-term memory, it starts to make you question how old they think Metroid's target demographic actually are. It tells you to collect the master teleporter keys, you collect a master teleporter key, and the game tells you you've collected a master teleporter key, and then Miles phones you to tell you you've collected a master teleporter key. And this keeps happening throughout the entire game. It never trusts you to learn anything. Wow, Mario, you just grabbed a power star. These can help you open doors so you can defeat Bowser and save the princess. Yeah, thanks, I'm like 20 hours into the game. I think I get it. Early on, when it seems like you're finally getting some freedom, you make your way to the volcano level, only to hit a roadblock like 5 seconds in. Then you pick up an item which it wants you to take back to Miles. At this stage, I genuinely couldn't believe it wanted me to already leave and backtrack through the desert again, so I figured I'd call him on the radio just to confirm, but it turns out when you actually want help, he's unavailable. So I was like, okay fine, I'll take the stupid chip back to stupid Miles, and only after you make that decision, he then calls you on the radio to reiterate that you should take the stupid chip to stupid Miles. And then the game demands you stop in your tracks to open the map, where it slowly holds your hand to remind you of a location you were just in, which it does over and over and over again. This game is obsessed with giving you advice, but only when it's the least helpful it could possibly be. Not to mention, Samus used to just install these types of things herself. Kind of ironic this is the game where you have average Joes constantly drooling over the thought of meeting the legendary, strong, independent Samus, but this version of her is completely reliant on some random nerd she'd be screwed without.
It's about to get real nerdy in here.
Now, to be fair, I don't think reminding the player what they've done is always a bad thing. If I had just booted up the game after a break, I'd be more than happy for Mackenzie to give me a quick recap and get me back into things. I mean, in the interest of immersion, it could just as easily be a log that you read, but again, I'm less of a purist when it comes to this stuff. This just isn't what's happening here though. You're treating the player as if you have zero faith they're paying any attention, and actively punishing those who are by constantly nagging them and wasting time. And speaking of wasting time, every time you make your way back to Miles, you have to traverse the Soul Desert, which just means going in a straight line for the most part. This place is a perfect example of open worlds done wrong. It's padding for the sake of padding, with essentially no meaningful gameplay, on top of being probably the least visually interesting area Metroid Prime 4 has to offer. If you want a good way of simulating the Soul Desert experience without buying the game, take the generic desert level from Sonic Frontiers, turn off the music, delete every platform, and then walk around slowly. That's basically it. And it's not like this game is an open world Metroid Prime with fully interconnected stages or something like that. The desert is the hub that connects everything, but it's not actually really connected to anything. Each area has their own entrance, which can be pretty drawn out and boring. It gets extremely repetitive after a while. I'm the kind of person who pretty much never uses fast travel. I feel like it often breaks the flow of the game, and I'd expect an open world to give me cool things to find, or at least nice visuals and music along the way. Here though, I was absolutely desperate for a fast travel option, but you never get one. Every single time you go from one area to another, you need to go through the lengthy process of leaving, crossing the desert, and then going back through the entrance for the 100th time. Not to mention, most of the time you need to make a detour to base camp in the middle of this, which has its own lengthy entrance and exit. If I could jump between areas, or at the very least if base camp was in the center, this could have easily been a non-issue. But as it stands, this is some of the most boring, repetitive backtracking I've ever experienced in such a short game. None of this is helped by the lack of music in the desert either. For a game with such an atmospheric soundtrack overall, it's so awkwardly quiet here. Okay, yes, there is technically music, but it's so subtle and quiet you basically can't hear it after a while. Say what you will about Hyrule Field, at least the music was always awesome. And speaking of Zelda, you could argue they're trying to do some kind of Breath of the Wild style immersive sound design, but that's just really not the case. While traversing, all you hear is motorbike sounds. While exploring, all you hear is motorbike sounds. While fighting enemies, all you hear is motorbike sounds. There's this giant sand boss, and all you hear is motorbike sounds. Like, come on. How can one game be so polished in one moment and then so unfinished in another? Clearly they knew this was an issue because you can spend an extortionate amount on plastic to unlock music. There are claims you can also do this by scanning everything in the game, but this doesn't seem to be actually true. Rather, you can unlock additional music, not the ability to play it to begin with. And even if this was true, you'd be playing the entire game before getting it, so what would even be the point? Now, I'd be lying if I said there's no content in the desert whatsoever. There's a few shrines with short but fun puzzles, and I actually liked these a lot, although I don't see a particular reason they couldn't have just been part of the other levels. By a few, I mean 6, and by short, I mean like 1 minute max. So it's really not a lot. You spend more time slowly opening all these psychic doors than you actually do on the puzzles most of the time. There's occasional enemies in the desert, but ultimately these just serve to make your time here slightly more inconvenient and annoying than it already was, which discouraged me from exploring the occasional Galactic Federation debris you'll come across, especially since there was rarely anything worthwhile in them to begin with. Later in the game you'll realize these sites aren't really here for you to explore as you come across them, but more so just landmarks that have been plopped in the map for the sake of a tedious fetch quest you'll be sent on to pad out the ending of the game. Samus, go and find all the big robot parts while the rest of us just stand around and do nothing. We've discovered teleportation technology, so we're going to use all of it on transportation right now, instead of using this big truck that we apparently have. Samus, I've detected you're looking at the debris and moving towards it, so I'm here to remind you that you're looking at the debris and should move towards it. This was the point I completely gave up, and I'll be honest, I just used a guide. So keep in mind, if this looks like boring padding, I'm actually cheating and taking the fastest possible route to exactly where I had to go. There was absolutely no way I would have kept playing if I had to explore the entire map again. And I probably would have just quit the game right here if I knew my reward for finishing this section would be for this fucking guy to insist I haven't collected enough green crystals. I'm not kidding. I always collected these things when I was traveling from one place to the next, but despite how much this desert had already overstayed its welcome, I only had a quarter of the green crystals required to move forward. So I spent about an hour roaming the desert doing the same thing over and over again, occasionally making the arduous journey back to base camp to offer them to the memory seed for some upgrades, ranging from pretty useful things like an improved shot and a barrier, to garbage like a speed buff for a mechanic I used 5 times total, all of which before I got the upgrade, and a scanner to find more green crystals. Yay. I mean, it does make the grind a little easier, but making mindless, unfun busy work slightly faster as a reward for having already done 75% of the mindless, unfun busy work that shouldn't even be in the game to begin with isn't something I'm going to celebrate. And how does this fucking guy even know I'm supposed to be feeding the green crystals to the memory seed to begin with? This was communicated only to Samus, the chosen one, way before we even saved him, and it's not like he can morph ball to get over there. But that brings me to this guy, Sergeant Duke, and along with his sidekick Armstrong, they work together to make the latter half of this game as unbearable as possible. While our friend Miles is annoying, he's sat around in base camp for 99% of the game and doesn't follow you around after the first section. He's cringe, but he's proud to be cringe, and you know what? He is at least genuinely entertaining, even if completely ironically and in a way that serves to make the game worse. So, win? And this guy's fine too, because at least he's completely forgettable. But once these two were introduced, the game only goes downhill. Don't get me wrong, cool things happened, but I got so annoyed and bored of the characters it became a complete slog, and I started paying less and less attention to anything that was happening, just out of self-preservation really. Samus, I need to turn the generator off, but I can't figure out the computer. Dude, I feel like I'm showing my mom how to change the input on the TV for the millionth time. Aren't these guys supposed to be like cool space soldiers or something? But okay, I guess these are magical pieces of technology only Samus can interface with, as indicated by the llama on hand. Wait, how is he doing that? After you save Duke, he decides to follow you around, spouting useful quips like, "Something just happened," and "Oh great, more lava in the lava level," and just generally being a nuisance by getting in my way and making me wait for him to catch up. Samus, you may need to find a new upgrade and come back to open that door. Since this is a Metroidvania game, and part of the core gameplay loop of a Metroidvania game is getting upgrades and then backtracking to open up new areas, as I'm sure you know considering you're more than halfway through this Metroidvania game. Then you and Duke finally make your way to Armstrong, and she's like, "Oh my god, it's Samus from the video game Metroid. Oh my god, she's going morph ball mode, you guys." No wait, that's Super Mario, and he just did his patented super jump. Despite the fact we know Samus is fully capable of talking and has done so in the past, she just chooses not to with these guys. I mean, she absolutely should be the John Wick type, only speaking when absolutely necessary, but after listening to 10 minutes of yapping, she answers pretty specific and important questions by simply pointing at things. It's kind of funny. She's normally silent because she's alone, but here it's more like Samus just doesn't respect these guys enough to respond, even though the story clearly wants to imply otherwise. It's not wrong to actively avoid an Other M situation where I think they were trying to humanize Samus, only to strip her of her actual personality in favor of being the director's ideal girlfriend, which of course would never work on me. But the lack of any back and forth means Samus has very little involvement in the game's dialogue, despite how constant it is. The reason I started to hate these two so much is because, unlike Miles, who quickly found a computer and then spent the rest of the game scrolling on Reddit or something, and this guy who never did anything, Duke and Armstrong refuse to leave you alone, insisting on being involved in every single fight. And don't get it twisted, just because these two jokers follow you around and shoot things does not mean they're helpful in battle. In fact, anytime they're involved in a fight, they probably become your biggest barrier to making progress. This game isn't hard at all, at least on normal difficulty, but having to constantly revive NPCs who stand in front of enemies because you will get a game over if they die is when I always took the most damage. This is a huge contributor towards the game getting more and more graining as it goes on, with these NPCs insisting on being involved all the time towards the end, only to be nothing but a hindrance. Except the robot, he actually is kinda cool and can do things Samus wouldn't be able to on her own. Unfortunately, we don't see much of him though. After everyone meets up to tackle the last big area together, yay, these two heroically sacrifice themselves to hold off the enemy while Samus and these f***ing guys move ahead. After refusing to shut up for a while, Duke heroically sacrifices himself to hold off the enemy while Samus and this fucking guy move ahead. Then you find this pretty awesome piece of machinery to break through the rock, and I was like, oh, that's cool, only to realize of course I wouldn't be operating it. Armstrong does that, while you protect her again. And then Armstrong heroically sacrifices herself to hold off the enemy while Samus moves ahead. This one doesn't even make sense. She had plenty of time to try and jump through if she thought she was going to die regardless. It's the rocks holding them off, not you. Then you meet up with the robot again, and then he heroically sacrifices himself to hold off the enemy while Samus moves ahead. Again. Well, that's like, what, 37 hero sacrifices in the past 15 minutes, with one of them being a repeat? Let me guess, they're all magically completely fine, aren't they? What's even weirder is that the first time you meet Duke and Armstrong, you're in a facility that's about to explode, and Duke leaves Samus to die with absolutely zero hesitation, assuming she'll just be fine somehow. And I mean, I guess the game does just cut to her being fine somehow, so he was right. Could have been fun to play as Samus as she narrowly escapes death, but whatever, I guess. I have to assume this is supposed to be some kind of arc where the characters learn to appreciate Samus as they work together, to the point they're willing to sacrifice themselves for her. But they already made it extremely clear everyone is very familiar with Samus and have the utmost respect for her from the start, so I don't really understand this. Using a trope or two is fine, but you can't have a hero sacrifice every 10 seconds, seriously. Once you make it out of the mine and grind out those fetch quests I mentioned earlier, you can head towards the final boss of this game. And although I got this far, like I said at the start, I didn't finish Metroid Prime 4. You fight Stylux, who I guess is here. I felt absolutely nothing seeing him, considering the past couple of hours have only consisted of unrelated banter and green crystal collection, not really much of a build-up. But as I approached the final battle, I realized something that became more and more clear, more inevitable. Every single one of these Muppets was going to be joining me, and that I would again have to run around reviving each of them between non-stop quips, instead of just focusing on the fight at hand. I died once and I closed the game. I wish in this moment I felt frustration or anger or anything, but I didn't. I moved on, and within about 10 minutes I forgot I had even been playing. I was so checked out, so bored of the padded content and the annoying characters, that I genuinely don't think I've ever cared less about the ending of a game. But for the sake of this video, I figured I'd at least watch the ending online. Maybe it really does change things, you know? Or just maybe everyone heroically sacrifices themselves to hold off the enemy while Samus moves ahead. It's honestly just funny they thought these characters were well written enough to justify any of this. In the end, this is far from the worst game I've played, and there's a lot that I liked. I truly do get the impression this was almost a fantastic experience from beginning to end, only to be ruined by meddling from higher ups with no idea what they were doing. It often feels like one writer writer tried to get the characters out of your way, like, don't worry, I get it. You want to explore alone, so it's up to Samus from here. Only for another writer to decide they need to immediately start talking to you over the radio, and then rejoin with you minutes later. The final product doesn't know what it's trying to be. It's Metroid Prime and a really watered down Zelda game and Guardians of the Galaxy without fully committing to any of these. All of the ingredients are here, they've just been poisoned at some point. The game could have functioned just fine if Samus was alone, with the padding removed and the levels either directly connected or connected through a smaller, more well thought out hub area. This version of the game would have been even shorter and playtesters probably would have gotten stuck sometimes, but that's what a Metroid game is supposed to be like. If they wanted to make something different and quote-unquote modern, they should have fully committed, instead of this awkward in-between where it's simultaneously Metroid Prime and the exact antithesis to Metroid Prime. It's like the game is uncomfortable with its own DNA. Ultimately, it's an incredible waste of potential, and by the end, the majority of my time spent playing this game was honestly a complete waste. I'll probably never think about it again. But you know what? At least all of these guys are dead. So, win?